Good morning, comic book fans. It's Rusty again with Collector Auctions, and as you can see, I'm in the car. I'm headed down to Chantilly, Virginia for Big Lick Comic Con Nova. This is a Comic Con held by Big Lick, the comic book shop out of Roanoke, Virginia, and they have two comic book shows a year, one down in Roanoke, Virginia, and one up here in Northern Virginia. And this is this one right here, thus the Nova, Northern Virginia. And it's a con that I went to last year. I checked it out, and I went down there, didn't know much about it. It turned out that they did not have a lot of comic book dealers, which I hope is a little bit different this time, but they did have a surprising number of really good creators that absolutely had no lines at. You go in, and I walk in, and there's no line for Jim Shooter and a lot of Rick Leonardi, and there were some other big names that were there, as well as a lot of other pop culture type people there. Like this year, there's definitely some WWE stars there. There are voice actors from the animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles going to be there. In fact, I think they're billing it as kind of a reunion. There's a couple other people there. There's some cosplay celebrities. Apparently, I don't know. It goes down the rabbit hole that I don't go down. But my big thing is Jim Shooter's there, going to be there. Walt and Louise Simonson, Howard Chaykin. Who else? There was somebody else. Christopher Priest is there. There's some other comic book creators. Specifically, I'm bringing a bunch of books that I hope I can get signed by Jim Shooter. I'm not sure what his prices are at a small con like this compared to what he normally charges at Baltimore Comic Con or Heroes Con. I know those prices can get a little steep. I'm hoping that it's a little bit cheaper here at a smaller con, but we will see. I've got some books that he either was the editor-in-chief on or actually wrote. I'm not sure. It's a good selection, and most of them are signed by other creators, which is why I want to get him signed on them. I do have a book for Christopher Priest, and I've got a couple books for Walt and Louise Simonson that I'm not really hot on. It's not the biggest thing in the world. In fact, I probably already have a copy signed from back in the day when they used to live here in the Maryland, Northern Virginia area. They used to come to these little comic cons, little comic shows really, called Serendipity. And I got a ton of X Factor, a ton of Thor books signed. But back in those days, for the most part, they were signing on the inside splash pages. We weren't signing on the covers because we hadn't got into the CGC grading era yet. But so I've got a couple of X Factor books that I might get signed. We'll see. I'm always interested in a case like that if they've got prints. I would love to see some Thor prints from Walt Simonson, but they don't need to come to comic book shows and hawk prints to make a living. They do this, I think, out of the love of the hobby and stuff, and they don't need to be carrying all that kind of stuff with them. We'll see how it goes. I will take some footage from the show, but I don't have a lot of time today. So I'll shoot what I can, and we'll get back, and I will sit down in the living room, and we'll show you everything that I get signed, everything that I buy today, and that's it. Sit back, enjoy the footage, and I will be right back. All right, guys, I just finished up at the Big Lick Comic Con here in Chantilly, Virginia. Had a great time today. Picked up some great comic books. I got some of them signed by some of the artists that were here. Definitely had a great time. I recommend coming to the show. It is a 2-day show here, and I can only come down on Sunday, so I had to come in and get what I could get, and had a great time. I was here a lot longer than I expected. So my plans got kind of foiled for the rest of the day, but that's fine because we got some great books and we got them signed. I will get home. I will show off everything I picked up today, and just I need you guys to stay tuned, and I'll be right back.
Much later.
All right, guys, I finally made it back home. Had a great time at Big Lick Comic Con Nova. Again, if you guys have ever had a chance to go to the show, I'm not sure if this is the second or third year now, but I had a great time. It was a really good crowd today, but it wasn't so big that you couldn't get back in line to some of your favorite artists that were there. In fact, I know some people that went through the Walt and Louise Simonson line at least 2 to 3 different times, and they were there through Hero Initiative, so they were taking donations for autographs and for sketches. So that's just a little preview. I've got some stuff coming up here. But let me get the elephant out of the room right now, which is my big mistake was I must have looked at last year's webpage, because I, again, thought Jim Shooter was going to be here this weekend, and he was definitely not here. So I had a backpack full mostly of Jim Shooter books that were here, where he mostly was the editor-in-chief on. But I wanted to add him to that. So I'm not going to go through all those books, but I'll show you some of the things that I had ready to go. A facsimile of Wolverine #1 that I've been working on since last year already has Claremont, Joe Rubinstein, and Louise Simonson right here, who did the editing on this. I wanted to add Jim Shooter, and at some point I'm hoping to see Frank Miller again, and I'll add him to this as well. This is a little bit of a project piece. And again, I had a bunch of books, but these are just 2 of the main ones I really wanted to get signed. This is Marvel Fanfare number 13. It's the last story, the last issue in that Black Widow little series that went on for, I think, about 4 issues. And I've got on here already George Brett, that's pretty good. George Perez, Brett Brading, John Beatty, Charles Vess, who did pinups in the back, or he may have done a Warriors 3 story. I can't remember which. Art Adams, who I got at Baltimore Comic Con last year on the cover there. And I really need to add, basically it's just Jim Shooter, who was the editor-in-chief at the time on this. And again, it's a project piece that I think it just puts the icing on the cake to get Jim Shooter on some of these books like this from that early 80s era like that. So there's other things here just like these, but we'll save them for, I believe he's going to be at Heroes Con. I'm not sure about Baltimore, but we'll take them down to Heroes Con. We'll get them signed down there. We'll see what the prices are. Because that was one of the things I noticed at this show was the prices weren't too expensive for the autographs. And again, the lines weren't too long. So let me put these down and let's get to what I started with today. As soon as they opened the doors, I went in and immediately headed over to the Artist Alley area. And this is, when I walk in, the first person I meet is Mark from Cards, Comics, and Collectibles. He is the owner of that store up in Reisterstown, Maryland. I've talked about him before and his store. He is the owner and creator of the Baltimore Comic Con. So he comes down to support the Big Lick guys at this show. So he sets up down here. And he was the first person that I ran into, and we were talking, and he said, who are you going to get signed? And I said, well, I'm going to start with Jim Shooter. He's my main one. And he looks at me and he goes, Jim Shooter's not here. I'm like, what? Really? He said, you can't miss him. He's definitely not here, but go check. Which I did, and I found out immediately, there was no Jim Shooter here. And I went back to Mark later on, and I kind of confessed that. But the books are already ready and prepped, so they'll be ready to go for Heroes Con here in a couple months. But that gave me a chance to look around and see who was doing what. Walt and Louise Simonson were there already signing. And I didn't get in that line because I didn't bring but a couple of books that
if I didn't get signed, it wasn't a big deal. So in fact, I wasn't even thinking about getting into their line. I was really worried about getting into the Jim Shooter line, which now, of course, is not happening. But another writer that I wanted was Christopher Priest, and he was there. And let me show you what he signed for me. It's Detective Comics 1000. It is the Frank Miller cover. And I actually just showed this to you in a video not that long ago where I added Jeff Johns right up here. And it's a bit of a project piece. I had won this in an auction from Third Eye Comics, and it was already signed by James Tinian right up here. And I started going through it, and I'm going, hey, there's definitely some other people in here. Why don't we go ahead and start working on this? I started on this last summer down at Heroes Con again. I got Steve Epstein right there, Brian Michael Bendis in Baltimore last year, and Jeff Johns just a few weeks ago, and then Christopher Priest added his signature over there on the side. And I got to talk to him for a little bit because he invited me. I was the first person to the table, really, at least the first fan, I suppose. And he pulled a chair out from behind a table, and he says, hey, sit down, let's talk. So I probably spent the first 10 to 15 minutes talking with Christopher Priest, which was pretty cool. He has done a lot of great books over the years. I know Black Panther is definitely one of those big ones. And he had worked on this story, a story in here with Neil Adams, and he kind of intimated that he didn't work with Neil Adams. He kind of got ran over by Neil Adams because he writes a story. Christopher Priest writes a story, and Neil kind of tells the story he wants to tell. And nobody cares because it's Neil Adams, right? So it was kind of funny. And we sat there and we talked about the local area here in Baltimore and the traffic and him being brought in by Hero Initiative. And he gets a stipend. He gets basically paid to come in, but it's more like a stipend, and he does it for the charity, and they pay for accommodations and everything like that. So there's definitely other shows that he will be at. And so we started talking about my work with Amazon, things like that. It was nice. It was having a nice conversation without just being fanboy to comic creator and what's important in their lives, or just talking about the comics themselves. So that was pretty cool. So I spent a few minutes with him, and then I started walking around. And this show, as I probably said earlier, is more of a pop culture show. So you had voice actors from a lot of the animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You had wrestling superstars. You had other cosplayers. You had, I think, some other animated or voice actors from some other animated or anime shows. I don't really know. These are not my rabbit hole things to go down. But you saw some of that in the video when I walked around a little bit. I took that chance right after meeting Christopher Priest and realizing Jim Shooter wasn't there to walk around the rest of the show, and that's where you saw some of the footage. There were a ton of people selling Funko Pops. There were multiple places with this designer fudge, really cool flavors and everything. In fact, the one that was in the shot during the montage, I've seen that company set up at all kinds of different cons, like the National Sports Collectors Convention. I saw them there last year, and that was in Chicago. So what I think is that they may actually franchise that to areas, and that they set up at all kinds of different cons like this. There were plenty of artisan, am I even saying that right? Doing all kinds of kind of craftsy type things, the leather works. It kind of fringes on entering that cosplay world a little bit, that fantasy world, being able to dress up like this and things. There were a lot of independent artists doing their own things. You saw some of that. I realize after I'm sitting here now that I probably didn't film a lot of that part of it in there. And part of it's awkward because you come around with in my case, I come around with the phone and I'm filming. It's pretty obvious what you're doing when you're walking around with the phone like that. It's maybe even more obvious than if you're actually just carrying a camera. Maybe that would be better in some way. But they don't have a lot of traffic at these tables. So the artists are, if they're not engulfed into whatever project they're working on at the table, they're just sitting there. And because nobody's coming up to them for the most part, and they are very much watching you film them. And I find that a little awkward. So I don't film a lot of that unless I don't want them having to look at me in the camera. I'm not, I don't know. It's just awkward. So I filmed what I filmed. There were plenty of comic book dealers here this time. Some of the ones I know, and gave me a chance to go through all their boxes. I found some great things. My buddies from Pop-Up Comics were set up a massive display, and I'm telling you something, they had some really tight, high condition comics keys up there on the wall. There was a run of Moon Knight. There were some Fantastic Four that were really good, but they know me. They know that in certain cases I'm looking for that 9/8 candidate, and he says there was specifically two copies of Fantastic Four 244. It's honestly the two best copies I've ever found at a comic book show in the last 3 years, but they're not 9.8s. And I told him, I said, yeah, I know. I took a closer look, and you go down, and there's the smallest of dog ears on both copies. I mean, very small. And I don't know if it was color breaking or not, but it was enough to give me enough pause to not buy that book. I've gone deep on that book before, so I passed on that. But he gave me a chance to go around and look for some Invaders books, and I found a handful that I needed, but nobody had them in the conditions that I was willing. I would have paid what they had on their bags and boards, but I wanted a better condition than what they were offering. So I didn't find any Invaders books that I picked up. But let me show you what I did pick up at the first place I went to. Well, the first place I bought something from. They had an interesting table. It's got some older stuff on there. And I looked at a few books. Conditions weren't what I really wanted for whatever I was looking for. In fact, I think there was a giant size Creatures, the first appearance of Tigra. The condition wasn't as good as I wanted. There was something else on that, and I can't remember. But right beside the book, the first book I actually looked at this particular dealer was a copy of Amazing Heroes. This is issue number 97. It's got this original cover by Dave Stevens. We'll get to Dave Stevens. Dave Gibbons of The Watchmen. And I have this. In fact, I still have it on my shelf up there in the guest bedroom, because there's a handful of these Amazing Heroes and magazines like Comics Interview and Comics Journal that I still keep to this day that were just my absolute favorites. The Dave Stevens cover where he's drawing a burlesque dancer. It's very popular now, but I've got my copy. It's been up there on my shelf for, well, since we bought this house 30 years ago. It's been on that shelf. So is this copy right here. I periodically pull this out and look at some of the art, and sometimes reread some of this article with the interview with Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. But I always loved this because you don't get a team shot of the entire team for the most part in the Watchmen series. They're not all together necessarily. In fact, they're not all together at all. Except for maybe some of the older scenes that were set in the 60s with the young Silk Spectre and much younger character. They were first time they'd ever kind of got together. I guess that was the first time. But this right here, I love this cover, and I took a look at it just to be polite, because the books that I had originally looked at weren't quite the condition I wanted, and I was putting them back, and I said, hey, let me take a look at this. And I took a look at it, and I'm going, oh my God, that is a really nice copy. You got that black cover, and it's thick, so you've got the spine that wraps around on the edge there, and this is a really nice copy, to the point where I might think about actually grading this. So that's crazy as it may be. We'll see about that. So I picked that up, but I also went around to see what else. I'm looking here. There wasn't anything else on the wall, but I went through the rest of the boxes, and let me show you what else I picked up. I did pick this up. I should have done my research just a little bit, but I only paid, well, they had a sticker price of $5 on there. This is the second issue of Bone, the original series, but it is the fourth print. And I probably should have been keyed into $5 price tag on this, because even the second issue of Bone the first series, graded and high grade, and this is a pretty high grade copy, is a really expensive book. And for $5, I should have realized that I thought I was getting the deal, but in reality, it's a fourth print. I'm okay with that. That's not a big deal. Didn't spend a lot of money on it. I did run across a very nice copy of Thor 412, and I went in and picked this up. Whenever I find a copy of this and 411, I usually will pick them up if it is a super nice copy, no spine ticks or anything like that. It is the first full appearance of the New Warriors, although it used to be this was the big book to get between the two. In recent years, it seems like 411 has been regarded as the more desirable book. It's the one with the Juggernaut on the cover. Of course, we got Ron Friend's artwork, Tom DeFalco writing, Joe Sennett doing the inking, and this is the first full appearance of the team, whereas 411 is the first appearance. It's really, to me, it's a cameo, just like Wolverine in Hulk 180 is. Final panel is the full team appearance. So either way, if I had found the other one, I probably would have picked it up too. But this was a really nice copy. Kind of was unexpected. And I was trying to get a few books here to kind of bundle a little bit to get the price down overall a little bit. So pick those up. And then the final book that I picked up, because, hey, I'm in the Thor section. Say that real fast. I picked up issue number 373. And the reason I picked up this issue right here is it's got that classic Walt Simonson cover right here. He was writing the book at this time, but he was not doing the interior art. Sal Buscema was. But these covers at the time are still fantastic. And this dealer had a lot of Thor Walt Simonson books, just like everybody else there, because, of course, Walt's at the show. They want to sell these books so people get them signed. Well, I got this one because I know that this book I had never gotten signed. I've gotten so many Thor books over the years, but I knew that this was not one of them. So you can see his signature right up there. And that, of course, brings us to the interruption in the buying of comic books. Let's go to the Walt Simonson line. So once I picked this up, I'm going, well, crap, let's go get Walt to sign it. That line is not very long. It was maybe 8 people at that point. Well, he was doing sketches for everybody. There was a charge for the sketch, and he was signing everything for $10 a piece. So some people were only getting a few things. Some people, there was one guy up there, I mean, he literally he must have laid down 20 comic books, and he had a giant set of color pins where he was having him sign, what was it? It was blank artist covers for different books. And he'd have Walt sign it in different colors and then write messages on it. I don't think he was doing any art at the time. But it was taking a little while for him to get through that. So he had to wait there for a little while, but nothing like I've waited for Walt in the past. And Louise is right there too. So while we're waiting and Louise is just kind of sitting there because Walt's taking forever, I bring a copy of X Factor number 13. It's got this wonderful Dark Phoenix cover right here, and you can see Louise signed it right here on the side, and then Walt signed it. It's a little hard to see with all the black, but he signed it up here at the top in the trade dress. And I've gotten so many of these signed over the years. They used to live in the Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland area. I'm not sure exactly where, but they used to come to the shows down in Silver Spring, Maryland called Serendipity. And I got the chance to talk about that a little bit. They had a moment before they actually took a break while signing because Walt's back was acting up. He needed to stand up and walk around. So we were sitting there talking, and I said, it must be good to come back to the area. And I said, I had so many, my favorite story was Walt showed me 3 of the issues from X Factor. I'm not sure which numbers now. It's in the 20s. But there are 3 interlocking covers. You lay all 3 of them side by side, and it forms one giant picture. And I never noticed that because, hey, it was a monthly book coming out. You'd read it, you put it up. Next month, you get the next one. And I took all those to the show and I didn't even realize it, but he took the books and laid them all out and he showed me that. And I said, I cannot remember a lot from those shows from the early 90s, but I remember that because you took time to do that with me. And I think they appreciate those kind of stories because it's genuine and heartfelt. But I also picked up something else from Walt because after he signed these books, he took a little bit of a break and then he came back and he's actually going to take a bigger break after he's going to do one more sketch. And I was the one more sketch guy. So let me dig that out and I'll be right back.
12 seconds later.
All right. Thank you for that moment for me to be able to dig out the cards. I should have had them ready to go, but I got a couple of other things signed, trading cards. And if you guys follow the channel, you know that I am the co-owner of a company called theautographcard.com. We produce over 74 blank signature cards designed for collecting autographs. And while most of it, the majority of it is sports related, we do a set of non-sports cards as well, including music, movies. We do a universal card that's good for anything, but we also do 2 different comic book style cards. First being this right here. It is the comic book greats card. And let me see if I can set it right, see if it'll stand up. It is, you can see Louise Simonson signed it right there. Now, I've gotten Walt on these before, so I didn't get him on this one, but I got her to sign one of those, and I will do a close-up right here. I'll put a close-up right here so you can see it better. But as I said, I got a sketch done on one of our sketch cards, and let me show you what he did. Right here, he did a Beta Ray Bill. He asked me who did I want, and I said, you've done a Thor sketch on these cards for me before. Let's do a Beta Ray Bill. And these cards were designed. I designed these cards to be able to do a little sketch right here and then do a signature at the bottom. So he sat there and he did this. And again, I'll put a picture of it right here. And it's going to go nice with the Thor one that I already have. So that's the sketch that I got from Walt Simonson at this show. So thank you, Walt. Thank you, Louise. Both of you guys are the best. When you go to shows, you are the best people with the fans. Absolutely. But these were not the only things that I got signed. I got a couple more things that got signed, but let's go back to actually buying comic books. I'm going around the show, and I keep going back to some of my dealers, and I kind of did my steps, and I was looking for more. I went back and I checked those Invaders books again just to make sure that I wasn't missing one that was really good. Again, I put it back. I'm trying somehow to get back on track of not really over buying stuff that I don't really need. Now, at Thor 412, I didn't need that. I probably should have just not bought that. But I ended up stopping at another dealer. And this is after looking at some other things. And I was finding some books that I kind of wanted, but conditions weren't quite what I wanted. But I stopped at a dealer, and I'd been there earlier. And as I'm going through the boxes, he had a box of Howard Chaykin books. So it was a small little booth, kind of U-shaped. And they were at the bottom of the U, I guess, and with the wall behind him, and only 2 people could be up there at one time. So it was there was somebody standing there. So I was at the top of the entrance to the booth, and I'm looking down, and there's a box of Howard Chaykin books. Now, I didn't bring anything for Howard Chaykin to sign. He signed kind of the things that I've wanted over the years. And I'm going through the box. It took me a moment to realize it was a Howard Chaykin box until I went to a complete run of American Flag. And that's when I oh, maybe I should pick up a first issue of American Flag. And I'm going, well, I've already got that. And they had 2 copies that just were, they had spine ticks. So I didn't get those. But I did pick up a couple things. And let's put all the cards down. And let's put Walt's books down. And I'll show you what I picked up. I picked up issue number 2. I believe that's 2, right? Yeah, number 2. And this was actually one of my favorite covers from the entire American Flag run, that original run that he did. This was one of my favorite covers. I remember I still have sketch pads sitting over there in the office where I was redrawing this same pose I was reimagining that with, and I did this years ago, but I never quite finished it. I was reimagining this as the Mark Miller characters from Wanted. You'd have the killer and the fox in this pose right there. And that's one of those things that if I ever got J.G. Jones to do a sketch for me, I would go back and ask J.G. Jones to use this as the inspiration to do a real drawing of that. That may be a project. I know he's going to be at one of the cons I'm at. If he's fairly reasonable in sketch prices, I might have to do something like that. But I took this back to the table with Howard Chaykin, and I got this along with one other thing signed. So let me show you this real quick. His signature, you can see it right here in the American flag part. It's a little hard on there, but it's right there in the red and the white. But at the back of this box of all these books, there was a whole run of American flag. There were some oddities in there. There was a whole run of Black Kiss as well. And if you guys have never read Black Kiss, it's a little risque. In fact, I've got a issue number 1 of that signed as well. But at the back of the box, they had some bigger books. And I'm going, oh, what's this doing in here? And I've taken a look at it. And I'm going, well, this is in really nice shape. And the price is actually pretty reasonable. Oh, he did this. I didn't realize it. It is the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is from a Marvel Super Special magazine. This is issue 18. This is a book I picked up last year purely because it was a fantastic condition book. And here, let me move this and see if I can get that glare off of there. There, that's a little bit better. This, of course, was the first appearance of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark in comic format. Now, it wasn't a comic book. This was the magazine. But Howard Chaykin did the artwork, at least on the cover. I don't know if he did it on the interior. I think he did, though. But what a beautiful illustration. And what's funny was I picked this up before I realized it was really a Howard Chaykin box. And then when I looked further, that's when I realized what it was. But I took this back and got it signed as well. And let's see. Again, I wish he would use a thicker marker, maybe a lighter marker, but it's just black Sharpie right up in this area right there. So those were the 2 things that I got from this particular dealer that I went and got signed. But I did find a couple of other things. And we'll start with, we'll end with these 2 right here. It is one of the Action Comics #1 reprints, facsimile reprints. It's not really, it's more of a reprint than a facsimile because it does not reprint the entire Action Comics #1. It's simply the reprinting of the Superman story. I want to say, I cannot remember which one this is, but I think it's one of the reprints that has some surprising value if you can get this graded. 9.8 it's from 88 to 92. It's somewhere in that time frame. In fact, I think I might have already gotten this graded myself. And when I saw a $5 price tag on there, I know that this one does pretty good as a 9.8, and the condition looked really good. But the thing that got me to stay at this booth was there was a beautiful Dave Stevens cover. I told you we'd get back to Dave Stevens. Here, let me set these down. And it was this here. It was Sheena, Queen of the Jungle 3D. And you've got this beautiful cover. And one that I did not have from Dave Stevens. And so when I came up there, I had the Howard Chaykin books. There was a guy up there. He actually had just looked at this and put it back. And then I asked to see it as he asked the dealer. He was still asking the other, there was a couple there. He was asking the main dealer, do you have any other Dave Stevens? And he pulls out from one of the boxes right there in front of him about a stack of about 1.5 inches of Dave Stevens books, including, I think it had the 2 Alien Worlds books. There were some Rocketeer books in there. There was the Jungle Comics one from Blackthorn. And there were a couple other things. I'm trying to think. Which one was it? There was the Marilyn Monroe cover from Crossfire. There was one other, and I cannot remember what it was. But if I thought about it, if I had been there 10 minutes earlier, I would have had a shot at some of those other comics because this guy was only buying the comics for a friend of his. And I had to be polite. I couldn't just say, hey, let me look at that while you're asking your friend if he wants to buy it. I was polite. I waited my turn, and in the end, he ended up. I was glad I had this already in my hand. He had put that back on the wall, and I grabbed that. But some of the other books that I couldn't get, and quite honestly, those Alien Worlds, I thought the conditions could be just a little bit better. And I was also at the point where I was done spending money as well. But this was the last comic that I picked up at the show. How can you go to a comic book show and not pick up a Dave Stevens these days? I did look at the Space Fictions book someplace. They had a $300 price tag on that. And if the condition had been a lot better, I might have been more tempted, because that is a super valuable book, 9.8, but it just, the condition scared me off with that kind of price tag. But overall, my overall assessment of this show was this was better than it was last year. It's only getting bigger and better. Yet the crowds weren't too bad. You could go back through that Walt Simonson line pretty easy. There was never more than maybe 10 people in line at any one time, it seemed like. And everybody else you could walk right up to. There was not huge lines every place else. And what's good about that is a lot of those artists are being Christopher Priest, the Simonsons, Howard Chaykin, I think John Beatty maybe as well. They're all being subsidized by Hero Initiative, who's taking on the costs. You know, they're giving up their time, but they're getting compensated for a lot of this. So great time, had a great time. I hope you guys can get a chance to go to this one next year. But one of the best things was, while we were waiting in line, the owner of Big Lick came out to greet everybody, and he gave everybody 2 tickets to the Big Lick Comic Con down in Roanoke, Virginia, coming this August. And my daughter and I had already talked about possibly going down there, because one of our favorite actors from Walking Dead, Michael Rooker, is going to be there. And of course, we like him for more than just Walking Dead, but that was one of those things. My daughter and I used to watch that show for years together. That was our Sunday nights together, and we loved Michael Rooker. I mean, it was awesome. So we may take those free tickets and go down there this coming August just for that. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, definitely give me a like. And if you enjoy this kind of content, consider subscribing to the channel and click on that notification bell so you guys don't miss out on any of my content that I put out each and every week, Mondays and Fridays at 10 a.m. But that's it, guys. I had a great time today. Definitely leave me a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think of today's haul and what you think of the Comic-Con here today. If you guys got to go, definitely let me know that too. Anyway, I'm out of here. I'm going to go get some rest because I am dead tired after having a late night at work last night and then heading down to this Comic-Con on Sunday. I'm going to go get some rest. Guys, you take care, and I will see you for the next show. Just remember, every comic has a story.